My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 30. Last Tuesday at 7:47 p.m., I was sitting at table 12 in Morton Steakhouse watching my father laugh in my face while holding my business card between two fingers like it was contaminated. "Chief Technology Officer," he said loud enough that the entire private dining room turned to look. "Elena, you can't just print fake business cards at Staples and pretend you have a real job. That's fraud." James Sullivan, my father's senior partner, sat 3 seats away with a champagne flute frozen halfway to his lips. He was staring at the card. I watched the exact moment his face changed. Confusion first, then recognition, then something close to panic. He knew that logo. He'd been looking at it on invoices for 3 years. My mother touched my father's arm. "Ricardo, not here. It's your birthday." "No, Maria, this is exactly where." My father turned the card toward the table. "Look at this. Tech Core Solutions. She probably made this on her laptop. Our daughter, the computer hobbyist, playing pretend." My brother David laughed into his wine glass. "Dad, come on. She's been doing the entry-level tech thing for years. Let her have her fantasy." My sister Isabel didn't laugh. She looked at me with something almost like pity. "Elena, maybe just don't bring work stuff to family dinners. You know how Dad feels about..." "About what?" I kept my voice level. "About my career?" "About you wasting your potential," my father said. He set the card down on the white tablecloth. "You had a full scholarship to pre-law at Georgetown. You threw it away to play with computers in some startup garage. 12 years later, you're still playing pretend." Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, please hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time is it there. I looked at James Sullivan again. He was reading the card now. Really reading it. His hand was shaking slightly. The TechCore Solutions account was worth $840,000 annually to Martinez and Associates. James managed it personally. He'd been managing it for 3 years without ever meeting the client contact, me, because all our communications went through encrypted email and video conferences where I never turned my camera on. Professional preference, I'd always said. He'd never questioned it. "Dad," I said quietly, "that card is real." "Elena." My father's voice had that edge it always got when he was about to deliver what he considered a life lesson. "I've been a lawyer for 34 years. I know what a legitimate business card looks like. This?" He tapped it. "This is embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself in front of my colleagues." There were 32 people in that private dining room. Partners from my father's firm, my mother's book club friends, my aunt and uncle, David's fiancé, Isabel's husband. All of them watching me sit there while my father explained very patiently why I was a failure. I picked up my business card. It was cream-colored, embossed, with my direct line and my executive email. I'd had 500 of them printed by the same company that did cards for our board of directors. I'd handed them out at 3 conferences in the last year. Forbes had photographed me holding one when they interviewed me for their 30 Under 30 in Tech feature 8 months ago. "I need to make a phone call," I said. I stood up. My mother made a small noise of protest. "Elena, don't be dramatic. Sit down. The appetizers are coming." I walked out of the Morton Steakhouse private dining room at exactly 7:52 p.m. In the lobby, I pulled out my phone and called my executive assistant. "Mara," I said, "I need you to pull the Martinez and Associates contract." "Now? It's almost 8 on a Tuesday." "Now! How long is our cancellation window?" There was a pause. 30 days with cause. Immediate with breach of contract. Why? "Send me the termination template. I'm executing it tonight." "Elena," Mara's voice was careful, "that's an $840,000 annual contract. Are you sure?" My hands weren't shaking. That was the strange part. I thought they would be. "Send it in 5 minutes. I'll sign it from my phone." I hung up. Through the glass doors of the private dining room, I could see my father holding court, probably telling the table another story about my wasted potential, my lack of ambition, My refusal to be serious. James Sullivan was still staring at my business card. Let me take you back 12 years to the day I told my father I wasn't going to Georgetown Law. I was 18, sitting in his office at Martinez and Associates. The office smelled like leather and old books and the specific kind of cologne that expensive lawyers wear. My father sat behind his mahogany desk, and my mother sat in the client chair next to me, and David stood by the window like he was watching a show. "You're throwing away your future," my father said. "Do you understand that? A full scholarship, pre-law. You'd be a lawyer by the time you're 25. I don't want to be a lawyer." "What you want?" My father's voice rose, then steadied. "Doesn't matter. What matters is building something real, something respectable, not playing video games in your bedroom." "It's not video games, it's software engineering. I got into the MIT program." "For what?" David cut in. "To become some tech support person?" "Elena, be realistic. That's not a career for someone from our family." Our family. The Martinez family. 3 generations of lawyers. My grandfather had founded the firm. My father had expanded it. David was a first-year associate, already being groomed for partner. Isabel had married a cardiologist, which my father considered almost as good as law school. And I wanted to write code. "I'm going to MIT, I said. My mother cried. My father stopped speaking to me for 6 weeks. When he finally did speak to me again, it was to tell me that I was no longer welcome at family dinners until I came to my senses and joined the real world. I went to MIT anyway. I graduated in 3 years. I got hired at a startup in Boston, then a bigger company in San Francisco. Then I was recruited by TechCore Solutions when they were just 12 people in a converted warehouse. That was 8 years ago. In 8 years, I worked my way from junior software engineer to senior developer, then team lead, then director of engineering, then CTO. I managed 140 engineers across 3 countries. I held 2 patents in cybersecurity encryption. I'd been featured in Forbes, TechCrunch, Wired. I'd given keynote speeches at 3 international conferences, and my family still thought I worked tech support. They thought this because I never corrected them. When they asked about my job at Christmas dinner, I said, fine. When they asked if I'd been promoted, I said, not really. When David asked if I still worked at that little security company, I said, yeah. I let them believe I was a failure because it was easier than fighting. Every year, the gap between their perception and reality grew wider, and every year I told myself it didn't matter. I had my career, I had my success. I didn't need their validation. Except I did. That was the truth I didn't want to admit. Some part of me, some stubborn 18-year-old part, still wanted my father to look at me and say, I'm proud of you. The first real betrayal came 3 years ago, at Isabel's wedding reception. I was standing by the bar when I overheard my father talking to a group of his lawyer friends. He had his arm around David, and they were all holding scotch, and my father was explaining his family tree. David's going to make partner before he's 35, my father said. He's brilliant, already brought in 3 major clients, and Isabel married a cardiologist. Dr. Michael Chen, have you met him? Exceptional young man. One of the lawyers said, and your other daughter? There was the smallest pause. Then my father said, Elena does computer work. Entry level. She's still figuring things out. Entry level. I was director of engineering at the time. I managed 47 people. I made $340,000 a year. I set my drink down on the bar and walked outside. I sat in my rental car for 20 minutes, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. Then I drove back to my hotel and didn't go to the family brunch the next morning. My mother called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Finally, she texted, Your father is very hurt that you abandoned Isabel's wedding weekend. You embarrassed us in front of the Chens. I typed back, I'm sorry. I always apologized. It was easier. The second betrayal came 18 months later, at Christmas dinner. I'd brought my work laptop because I was on call that week. We were in the middle of a major product launch, and as CTO, I needed to be available if anything crashed. During dessert, my phone buzzed with an alert. I excused myself, went into my father's study, and spent 45 minutes on a video call with my team in Singapore troubleshooting a server issue. When I came back, the dining room was empty except for my mother clearing plates. "Where is everyone?" "They left. Your father was very upset." "I was working, Mom. It was an emergency." "Elena," she set down a stack of plates, "you can't keep pretending this little computer hobby is more important than family. Your father works very hard to include you, and you repay him by hiding in his office playing on your laptop." Playing. That word. Like I was 12 years old. "It's not a hobby. It's my career." "Sweetheart." Her voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I know you enjoy it, but it's time to be realistic. You're almost 30. David is going to make partner. Isabel has the twins. What do you have? You're not married, you're not building anything real, and you're still doing the same entry-level work you were doing at 22. I was CTO by then. I had 140 engineers reporting to me. My salary was $680,000 plus equity. I'd just been offered a board position at a major tech company. I have a career, Mom. You have a job. She picked up her plates again. There's a difference. Jobs are what you do until you figure out your real life. David has a career, he's building something. You're just drifting. I left before coffee. I drove back to San Francisco on December 26th and spent the rest of the week working 18-hour days because work was the one place where people saw me. The third betrayal, the one that changed everything, happened 6 months ago. I was at a cybersecurity conference in Boston. I was the keynote speaker, the future of zero-trust architecture in enterprise systems. 1,500 people in the audience, live streamed to 12,000 more. The kind of thing that gets written up in industry publications. During the Q&A session, someone asked about work-life balance. I gave my standard answer about setting boundaries, about building teams you trust, about the importance of delegation. After the keynote, I was doing a meet and greet in the sponsor lounge when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Elena? Elena Martinez?" I turned around. James Sullivan, my father's senior partner, was standing there with a conference badge and a very confused expression. "Mr. Sullivan, hi. I didn't know you were in tech. I thought—" He stopped. "Your father said you did entry-level computer work." I could have corrected him then. I could have said, "I'm the CTO of TechCore Solutions. We've been your client for 3 years. I'm the one who signs off on your firm's legal invoices every month." Instead, I smiled and said, "I do cybersecurity consulting. Are you here for the conference?" "Client development. We represent several tech firms." He was still looking at me strangely. That was an incredible keynote. "How long have you been working at that level?" "A few years." "Does your father know?" And there it was, the question I'd been avoiding for 8 years. "We don't really talk about my work." James nodded slowly. "He's very proud of David." "I know." James opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, then changed his mind. "Well, great to see you, Elena. That really was an excellent presentation." He walked away. I stood there in the sponsor lounge with a glass of wine I wasn't drinking, thinking about the fact that my father's business partner had just watched me give a keynote speech to 1,500 people, and my father had no idea I was even in the industry. That night, alone in my hotel room, I did something I'd been avoiding for 3 years. I pulled up the client list for Martinez and Associates. It was public information. Law firms have to disclose major clients. And there it was, third on the list, TechCore Solutions. Annual retainer, $840,000. I'd known, theoretically, that TechCore used my father's firm. Our general counsel had recommended them when we needed litigation support for a patent dispute. That was 3 years ago, right after I became CTO. I'd signed off on the contract without really thinking about it. The legal department handled the relationship. I'd never looked at the invoices, but now I did. I pulled them up in our internal system, page after page of billable hours, trademark filings, contract reviews, employment litigation support, patent work, all of it managed by James Sullivan, all of it billed to my approval code, all of it paid from accounts I controlled. My father's law firm wasn't struggling, exactly, but $840,000 was roughly 20% of their annual revenue. Losing that contract would hurt. It would mean layoffs. It would mean downsizing. It would mean my father admitting to his partners that his firm wasn't as stable as he pretended. I closed my laptop. I didn't do anything with the information. I just sat there, in a hotel room in Boston, thinking about how my father had spent 3 years collecting money from my company while telling people I did entry-level computer work. The harassment started small. My mother would call and say things like, "David brought in another major client. Your father is so proud. When are you going to do something that makes us proud?" My father would send articles about real careers with subject lines like, "Thought you might find this interesting." Isabel invited me to her twins' birthday party, then mentioned that all the other adults there would be doctors and lawyers. "Just so you're prepared for the conversation level," she said. David started introducing me at family events as my sister who does tech support. When I corrected him, "I'm in cybersecurity," he'd laugh and say, "Same thing." But the worst was the silence. The specific kind of silence that happened when I walked into a room and my father was talking about his children's accomplishments. He'd go quiet, change the subject, act like I wasn't there. I told myself it didn't matter. I had my career, I had my team, I had respect from people who actually understood what I did, but it mattered. Then came last Tuesday, my father's 62nd birthday dinner at Morton Steakhouse. I almost didn't go. I was in the middle of a product launch. We had a board meeting the next day. I had 17 things that were more important than sitting through another dinner where my family reminded me I was a disappointment. But my mother called and said, "Please, Elena, it would mean so much to your father. He specifically asked if you were coming." So I went. I wore a black dress. I brought a card with a gift certificate. I sat down at table 12 in the private dining room at exactly 7:30 p.m. and I smiled at 32 people who barely acknowledged I existed. James Sullivan was there. I hadn't known he would be. He was sitting near my father, clearly invited as a valued colleague, and when he saw me, his face did something complicated. "Elena," he said, "good to see you." "Mr. Sullivan." My father didn't introduce us. He was busy telling a story about David's latest courtroom victory. I sat between my mother and Isabel and tried to look interested while my father described, in detail, how brilliant his son was. Then dinner was served. Steaks, wine, the kind of expensive meal my father ordered when he wanted to show off. Somewhere around the second course, Isabel asked what I'd been up to. "Work, mostly. We're launching a new product line." "Still at the same company?" David asked. "That little security startup?" "It's not little. We have offices in 3 countries." "But you're still doing the same thing? Haven't moved up?" I could have told him then. I could have said, "I'm the CTO. I run the entire engineering organization. I make more money than Dad and you combined." Instead, I said, "I like what I do." My father laughed, not kindly. "Elena's very attached to her computer games." That's when I made the mistake. I pulled out my business card. I thought maybe, just maybe, if he saw the actual title, if he saw the real company name, he'd realize I wasn't lying. I handed it to him. "Dad, this is what I do." He took it, he looked at it, and then he said the words that ended everything. "Chief Technology Officer? Elena, you can't just print fake business cards at Staples and pretend you have a real job. That's fraud." The room went quiet. James Sullivan's face went white. My mother touched my father's arm. David laughed. Isabel looked at me with pity. And something inside me, something that had been bending for 12 years, finally snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a clean break. I stood up. I picked up my business card from where my father had dropped it on the tablecloth. I walked out of Morton Steakhouse at 7:52 p.m., and I called Mara. "Send me the contract termination template." At 8:03 p.m., I was sitting in my car in the Morton Steakhouse parking lot. I signed the document terminating Martinez and Associates' contract with TechCore Solutions, effective immediately for cause. Cause being conflict of interest. The CTO's family relationship with the firm created an untenable ethical situation. I sent it to our general counsel for counter-signature. Then I sent a copy to James Sullivan's email. Then I drove home. My phone started ringing at 8:47 p.m. James Sullivan. I didn't answer. He called 3 more times. Then my father called. Then David. Then my mother. I turned my phone off and went to bed. The next morning, I had 23 missed calls and 14 text messages. From James Sullivan. Elena, please call me immediately. We need to discuss the TechCore contract. From my father. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is extremely unprofessional. From David. You're really going to tank Dad's firm over a birthday dinner argument? Grow up. Sí. And from my mother. Please fix this. Your father is very upset. I deleted them all. I got dressed. I went to work. I had a board meeting at 10 a.m., and I presented our Q3 numbers, and nobody there thought I printed my business cards at Staples. At 2:30 p.m., my assistant buzzed me. Elena, there's a Ricardo Martinez here to see you. He says he's your father. He doesn't have an appointment. I should have said no. I should have had security escort him out. Instead, I said, give me 5 minutes, then send him in. I used those 5 minutes to pull up the contract termination document, the invoice history, and the email chain where James Sullivan had been communicating with E. Martinez, CTO, for 3 years without realizing who I was. My father walked into my office at exactly 2:35 p.m. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown San Francisco. He looked at the Herman Miller chair, the standing desk, the 2 monitors, the framed Forbes cover on the wall with my face on it. This is your office? Yes. He walked in slowly, like he was in a museum. You're actually the CTO? Yes. You've been the CTO for how long? 3 years. He sat down in the client chair across from my desk. He looked smaller than he had at dinner, older. James called me this morning. He said you terminated our contract. I did. Elena. His voice was careful now. That contract is worth $840,000 a year to my firm. It's 20% of our revenue. We'll have to lay people off. I know. You can't just... He stopped, started again. This is because I didn't believe your business card? No. This is because you spent 12 years telling everyone I was a failure while cashing checks from my company. I didn't know. You didn't ask. I kept my voice level. You didn't ask what I did. You didn't ask where I worked. You didn't ask if I'd been promoted. You just decided I was a disappointment and told everyone who would listen. You thought I was entry level. You told James Sullivan I was entry level. You told your friends I did tech support. You told Mom I was drifting. My father's face was red. If you'd just told me. I shouldn't have had to. I pulled up the email chain and turned my monitor so he could see it. This is 3 years of correspondence between your firm and my company. James Sullivan has been emailing me directly this entire time. My name is on every invoice approval. You could have looked. You chose not to. He stared at the screen. I don't understand. I know. That's the problem. There was a long silence. Outside, the San Francisco fog was rolling in, turning the buildings across the street into gray shapes. Finally, my father said, What do you want? To humiliate me? To destroy my firm? Is that what this is? No, I want you to leave my office. Elena, I want you to leave my office. And I want you to think about the fact that you spent 3 years taking money from a company you didn't respect, managed by a person you didn't believe in, doing work you thought was fake. I stood up. And then I want you to not call me. I want you to not text me. I want you to not send Mom to guilt me. I want you to leave me alone until you can figure out how to treat me like a person instead of a disappointment. My father stood up. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue. Then he just said, You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. He left. I sat back down at my desk and stared at my computer screen until the words stopped blurring. 2 weeks later, James Sullivan resigned from Martinez and Associates. He sent me a personal email. I can't work for a firm that treats family the way your father treated you. For what it's worth, you're the best client I ever had, and I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. 1 month later, my mother showed up at my apartment at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday. Can I come in? I let her in. She sat on my couch and didn't say anything for a full minute. Then, your father's firm is in trouble. They lost 3 more clients after James left. David thinks they might have to close. Okay. Okay? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Mom? I want you to fix this. You're destroying your father's legacy. I'm not destroying anything. I removed my company from a contract that wasn't working. That's business. This isn't business, this is family. Then maybe Dad should have treated me like family instead of a failure. My mother's eyes filled with tears, not the genuine kind. The kind she used when she wanted you to apologize for making her feel bad. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold. I'm just done pretending that silence is the same as peace. She left. She didn't slam the door, she just walked out quietly, like I was already gone. 3 months later, my father sent an email, subject line, "We should talk." I deleted it without reading. 6 months later, last week, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. David was getting married. Black tie event. Street. Francis Hotel. The invitation was addressed to Ms. Elena Martinez. No +1, no note. I called the hotel. I asked to speak to the event coordinator. I said, I need to know if James Sullivan is on the guest list. I can't give out that information. I understand. Let me rephrase. I'm considering attending this wedding. If James Sullivan is there, I'll come. If he's not, I won't. Can you confirm his RSVP status? There was a pause, then, Mr. Sullivan RSVP'd yes 2 weeks ago. Thank you. I RSVP'd yes. I bought a new dress, and yesterday I walked into the St. Francis Hotel ballroom at exactly 6:30 p.m. My father saw me first. He was standing near the bar with David, both of them in tuxedos, and when he saw me, his face went carefully blank. My mother hurried over. Elena, you came. I was invited. Yes, but... She glanced back at my father. Your father wasn't sure you'd actually come, after everything. After I terminated his biggest client because he called my career fake? Her face tightened. Elena, please, not here. This is David's day. I walked past her. I found James Sullivan near the silent auction table. He looked genuinely happy to see me. Elena, I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't. How are you? How's TechCore? Good. We just closed a Series C, $120 million valuation. James whistled softly. Congratulations. You've built something remarkable. Thank you. We talked for 15 minutes about the industry, about his new firm, about the cases he was working on. Normal conversation. The kind of conversation where someone sees you as a professional, not a disappointment. Then dinner was served. I was seated at table 18, in the back corner, with cousins I barely knew. My father's table was at the front, near the head table. James Sullivan was at table 3, with the important guests. During the speeches, David talked about family, about how his parents had always supported him, always believed in him, always pushed him to be his best self. My father cried. My mother held his hand. Nobody mentioned me. After dinner, I was standing by the dessert table when my father approached. Elena, can we talk? About what? About us? About the firm? About... He gestured vaguely. Everything. There's nothing to talk about, Dad. There's everything to talk about. I made mistakes. I see that now. But you can't just cut us off. I didn't cut you off. I set a boundary. There's a difference. A boundary that's destroying my business. Your business destroyed itself when you spent 12 years disrespecting the person who was funding 20% of it. His jaw tightened. I'm your father. I know. That's what makes it worse. He left. 10 minutes later, Isabel found me. That was cold, Elena. What was? Dad is trying, he's apologizing, and you're being cruel. I'm being honest. You're being selfish. Do you know how many people are going to lose their jobs when his firm closes? Real people, with families, and you don't care because your feelings got hurt. My feelings didn't get hurt, Isabel. My entire career got dismissed, for 12 years, while he took money from my company. So this is revenge? No, this is self-respect. She stared at me. Then she said, I don't even know who you are anymore. Yeah, that's been pretty clear for a while. I left the wedding at 9:15 p.m. I drove home. I poured a glass of wine. I sat on my balcony overlooking the San Francisco skyline and thought about the fact that I'd just walked away from my brother's wedding because staying would have meant pretending everything was fine. And maybe that made me cold. Maybe that made me selfish, but it also made me honest. The next morning, I woke up to a text from James Sullivan. Thank you for coming last night. It meant a lot to see you. Also, if you're ever looking for legal counsel for TechCore, my new firm would love to talk. I smiled. I texted back, send me your rates. 3 days later, I hired James Sullivan's firm. New contract, $600,000 annually. Enough to keep his practice growing, not enough to make them dependent. When I told our general counsel, she said, Are you sure, given the history with your father? I'm sure. James is a good lawyer. That's all that matters. That was last week. Today, I'm sitting in my office on the 42nd floor, looking out at the city, and I'm thinking about what my father said at the wedding, that I'm destroying his legacy. But here's the thing about legacies. You can't build them on someone else's invisible labor and then act surprised when that labor gets withdrawn. My father built his career on the idea that only certain kinds of work mattered: law, medicine, traditional success. And when I chose a different path, he decided that path was worthless. He decided it so thoroughly that he couldn't see the truth even when it was funding his firm for 3 years. That's not my failure. That's his. If you're watching this and you've ever had to choose between family approval and self-respect, type, I chose myself in the comments. Or, if you're still trying to find the courage to set that boundary, type, I'm working on it. Both are brave, both are valid. 6 months from now, I don't know if my father's firm will close. I don't know if David will forgive me. I don't know if my mother will ever understand. But I know this. I wake up every morning and I go to a job where people respect me, where my title is real, where my business cards aren't fake. And that's worth more than any family dinner ever was.